Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to some all new Armoured Warfare gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we are going to be continuing the theme from our previous episode, a link to which has been provided in the top right corner of your screen as displayed now, where we are taking a look at some of the lower tier vehicles within Armoured Warfare. And today we are going to be featuring the Soviet Main Battle Tank, or MBT, known as the T-54. This is a Tier 2 MBT which forms a part of the core vehicles within Shishkin's dealership line. And whilst this vehicle in my opinion should be renowned for its overall frontal armour profile, which is rather sturdy and resilient to even Tier 3 guns, and at the same time it has quite a meaty punch in the form of its 100mm main gun, the emphasis of this video is going to be on the concept of brawler engagements, whereby we take a sturdy MBT, such as the T-54, down onto the front line and try to win the battle through a war of attrition, where we intend to knock out our opponents gradually by ourselves and at the same time with the assistance of others at longer ranges, and be the last to survive and make it through to the enemy base, or alternatively knock out the entirety of the enemy team. But before we can go into our gameplay, let's just take a look at our setup. Starting with our commander, today we have elected Jonas Sanna, if that is how you pronounce his name. Reason being, Jonas' skill set on the whole provides us with a number of buffs to our ability to do hidden damage, and this hidden damage can bleed into the visible damage. Now let's just define those two terms. Visible damage in my experience is the damage you see on your opponent's vehicle, i.e. their health bar slowly being knocked down towards zero from maximum. Hidden damage is in terms of knocking down the health and eventually knocking out modules and crew members within a target vehicle, and also the chances of you setting your opponent on fire. And when your opponent catches fire, of course, they start to bleed their visible health point pool. Jonas' skill set enables us to buff all these hidden attributes quite nicely, and means that in the midst of those close range brawler engagements, we can leave our opponents in a significantly crippled state if we happen to get knocked out, alternatively they decide to retreat. Our first skill then is anti-material explosives, which improves the module damage we cause to enemies by 20%. This is a straight, flat buff towards module damage and means straight away we have high chances of knocking out items such as ammo racks and fuel tanks, but more on fuel tanks in a second. Our second skill is Firestarter, which doubles the chance to cause a fire when an enemy vehicle is damaged, and this brings us straight away back to fuel tanks. Now this may sound a little bit odd. We are shooting our opponents typically in the front, and fuel tanks are not always located in the frontal region of a given target. But what one has to consider is this. Fuel tanks are typically located towards the rear of an enemy vehicle, and so is the engine deck. When we are firing through the front of a target vehicle at very close range, we are going to have the maximum penetration power of the armour-piercing rounds we typically fire. We need as much penetration as possible to get through the most serious armour of our opponent. This means that sometimes the shell will not only penetrate our opponent's frontal armour, but go all the way through, depending on the thickness of our opponent's armour and the overall thickness of their internal tank structure or vehicle structure. The shell may sometimes go all the way through to the engine deck and the fuel tanks, and if this happens you are striking the two modules which can catch fire in game, if I remember correctly. And in doing so, when we bring in the Firestarter skill, we instantaneously double the chance of causing a fire to our opponent, and we can bring this in with our first skill in the ability to do more module damage to these two flammable modules, thereby on the whole increasing our chances of setting our opponents on fire, and at the same time increasing our chances of causing a visible health point pool bleed in the long haul. For our third skill, we are using anti-personnel explosives, which increase the crew damage we do to our opponents by 20%. Again, another flat buff, much like the first skill that we have. For our fourth skill, we have Watch It Burn, which improves our rate of fire by 10% for up to 30 seconds after starting an engine fire on one of our opponents. And this leads to two very nice scenarios. Say we have two opponents in front of us, and we set one of them on fire, using our first three skills. When we set that opponent on fire, they may not have enough health and may not have a fire extinguisher equipped in their consumables to be able to put that fire out before they get knocked out. So we can do one of two things. We can use our fire rate buff to knock them out first and then focus on our other opponent. Alternatively, we can instantly switch our aim to the other opponent who is yet to be fired on and use our fire rate buff to knock them out faster and perhaps even set them on fire as well. So this means we can do more damage per minute to our opponent when we do set one of them on fire. So a rather nice little damage per minute buff there. And for our final and fifth skill, we have Bullseye, which improves the minimum accuracy of our main gun, i.e. when the accuracy circle is the largest, by 10%. This means we can snapshot our opponents in those brawler style engagements when we are continuously reversing and accelerating around a corner, trying to hit our foes and at the same time duke their shots. This also means that sometimes we can take some snapshots at longer distances, although not necessarily. We are playing to more of a brawler style of play here rather than a sniper. Coming on to our crew, I am personally driving the vehicle with the skill of Smooth Ride, which improves our accuracy whilst on the move by 20%. This enables us, when we are crossing open ground at a distance from our opposition, to charge towards them and fire some shots off. These are only going to be pop shots, but at the same time, if we use auto aim, or alternatively manually aiming at our foes, we may have the chance of actually hitting and penetrating them rather than wildly missing. And this can cause our foes to be intimidated to pulling back behind cover, meaning they cannot snipe at us as we cross the open ground and close the distance. As for our gunner, Lily Fournier, she has the skill of Quick Draw, which improves our aim speed by 10% and means when we try to aim for enemy weak spots at close range, such as turret rings and driver's hatches, we can get these shots off faster, as we'll be able to get to our maximum accuracy just that little bit faster. And as for our loader, Susanna Szymanska, she has the skill of Rapid Fire, which improves our rate of fire by 2.5%, and this enables us to improve our rather weak reload rate as of stock just that little bit, meaning that we can get a couple more rounds off over the course of an entire game, and this also means that we're just that little bit more competitive in the damage per minute department when we're in those close range engagements. As for ammunition loadout, we can carry a maximum of 50 rounds. Our first 30 will be the 100mm BR412D AP armour piercing rounds. These have an average damage of 251 for an average penetration of 186mm. Whilst the alpha damage here, i.e. that 251, is rather respectable and will make you competitive even against some tier 3 MBTs, it is the penetration that we are interested in here, whereby we have the ability to go through the front of any given foe we can face, so long as in the case of the most heavily armoured foes, such as T-54s at tier 4, we aim for frontal weak spots, such as the lower frontal plates, the turret rings, the driver hatches and the cupolas, although we extend the cupolas more towards the tier 3 M60 and the tier 4 M60A2 Starship, whereby striking the cupolas of these vehicles will still lead to the maximum possible damage, not a reduced amount. If we want to maximise our damage output against those foes with less armour, even some MBTs we encounter from the front, then we'll be switching to our 15 100mm 3UBK9 high explosive anti-tank rounds, or heat ammunition, whereby these have an average damage of 282, significantly more than the armour piercing rounds, and a rather less penetration of 159mm, but still a rather respectable amount. This means that we can cut through the front of the likes of the tier 3 Leopard 1 and T-62 and absolutely shred our more lightly armoured foes such as the Scorpion and the M41. These rounds are going to be incredibly effective against armoured fighting vehicles and light tanks in particular. And as for our final 5 rounds, we have the 100mm 3UOF-10 high explosive HE rounds. These have a damage upon non-penetration ranging between 41 and 201 for a penetration of 14mm and a minimum damage armour threshold of 91mm. The logic here is that we only have these rounds in the instance where we encounter a very heavily armoured MBT foe, such as a T-64, who is only showing the top of their turret and their gun towards us, whereby we want to be able to snap out, fire off one of these high explosive rounds and do a small amount of damage and potentially some module damage such as that to their gunner viewport, their commander viewport or their main gun, or perhaps even knock out the turret ring if we are lucky. And in doing so we also reduce their health pool very slightly, and sometimes we can use this to knock out our foe if they only have 10 to 20 health remaining. But we are not going to rely on these rounds only in the most dire of circumstances. In our consumables we have the standard trio of the repair kit, the first aid kit and the fire extinguisher. Meanwhile for our retrofit, of which we only get one in a universal slot, we have decided to use the Intercom Systems Mark II, which provides us with a flat buff of 6.25% to our crew stats, thereby improving skills such as, but not being limited to, our reload rate, our turret traversal speed, our acceleration, and our overall accuracy. Now some of you may be wondering as to why we did not pick a firepower retrofit, and in particular the experimental propellant, in order to boost the damage per shot of our main cannon even further. Well, this would be a very direct way of improving one of the core strengths of this vehicle, and I personally feel that our alpha damage, i.e. our damage per shot, is more than enough for the brawler playstyle. And at the same time we do not need an armour retrofit in order to improve our overall health pool or the strength of our modules, as we want to use our frontal armour to stay alive, and as we will come on to very shortly, it is quite an effective amount of frontal armour and is actually going to be quite difficult to penetrate, even for some Tier 3 and Tier 4 vehicles with higher caliber guns. But coming back to the intercom systems, the intercom systems enable us to improve some of the aspects of this vehicle that are weaker by comparison with its tier contemporaries, most notably its straight line acceleration and its turret traversal speed. And we also have to consider, despite the fact when fully upgraded this vehicle does have a rather respectable aim time, we want to bring this in even further to make sure we can get shots off as quickly as possible. So we are indirectly improving our capabilities in being able to do damage to our opponents and being able to do more damage per minute by the fact we'll be able to aim in faster, thereby getting our shots off faster. We also have an improvement to our reload rate, which means on the whole we can get more shots off per minute. So these two already mean that we can do more damage per minute and whittle down the health state of our foes in those brawler style encounters. And when you also consider that our turret traversal speed is improved and our acceleration is improved as well, this means that if our foes try to run away from us, or alternatively try to flank around us, we will be prepared and in an improved state to be able to track them with our main gun and knock them out accordingly. Finishing off with our vehicle stats, we have already discussed how our alpha damage is one of our core strengths, with the statistics being listed here for our armour piercing rounds. In translating these values through to our sustained damage, we can see how our damage per minute of 2,103 has remained rather respectable, seeing as this is on average approximately 350 hit points lower than the damage per minute values taken up by Tier 3 MBTs, which on the whole does mean that we remain competitive in Tier 3 matches and can even influence Tier 4 matches if and when they occur. And we have managed to get our reload time down. Once we consider our crew and our retrofits, we have brought it down to 7.16 seconds from its original 8 seconds, meaning that the Tier 3 and Tier 4 tank destroyers that we may face will no longer have the fire rate ratio of 2 rounds to our single round, but this has been reduced to 1.5 rounds of their gun to 1 of ours. In our defence we have a rather mixed approach, whereby we only have 930 hit points, which is rather low for an MBT, even by comparison with the hit points of your Tier 2 counterpart, the Pattern 48. However, when looking at our armour, we can see that we have the armour to be able to deflect the rounds in order to try and keep our hit points as high as possible, whereby our hull and turret are both made out of steel, with the modifier of 1.0 for all round types incident. In terms of our values then, at the front, and talking about the turret and then the hull respectively, we have 205mm in the turret and 120mm in our upper frontal plate, which at a distance acts as the equivalent of 200mm of frontal armour, so long as our opponents do not get too close and are able to shoot down into this plate, making it non-sloped and thereby flat. In the sides we have 130mm and 80mm respectively, and in the rear we have 60mm all round. For reference, our lower frontal plate, i.e. the one that angles the opposite way to our top frontal plate, can be penetrated by guns for an approximate penetration of 160 to 170mm rather reliably, which means that we want to try and avoid exposing our lower frontal plate to those foes with guns with penetration values in excess of that, although heat rounds may struggle as they do not work as well, in my experience, against sloped armour versus flat armour. In coming back to our statistics then, in the mobility department, we can see that our maximum speed is 48.6 km an hour, which is decent at best and means that once we get going, we can get to the front line rather fast and traverse across open ground rather quickly, although not as fast as light tanks and AFVs, high armoured fighting vehicles. Although we do have to be wary of our acceleration time, a time of 7.9 seconds from 0 to 32 km an hour. This is rather typical of a main battle tank. In our utility, our camouflage rating of 0.165 for all terrains, and we do not have camouflage in this vehicle, means that we can hide ourselves rather well at a distance in a bush and can act as a long distance sniper, so long as we have someone spotting for us with our limited view range of 360 metres, which emphasises our need to get close to our opponents and limit the distance of the engagement, as otherwise our foes will be able to spot us typically well before we can spot them. In the targeting department, we have a rather mixed bag, whereby we have rather superb gun depression, i.e. 9 degrees over the front and 6 over the back, which means that we can work ridgelines to our advantage, especially with our turret armour, and we also have to consider that our turret is curved, meaning that the 205mm of frontal turret armour is going to be even more effective due to the number of angles it can be struck at. Over the rear we have that 6 degrees of gun depression, which means low profile opponents will not be able to get behind us and stay under us, and we are also a rather low profile vehicle, which means it is going to be very hard for opponents to try and sit under us at close range and avoid the power of our 100mm main gun. But on the other hand, that does of course mean that our opponents will tower over us and be able to shoot down into our armour and at the same time into the top of our turret. Although that is more of a rarer one, we're more looking towards our hull armour being shot down into. As for our accuracy spread, we have an accuracy of 0.12, which is decent but means that this vehicle is not going to be the ideal sniper compared to some of the accuracy values that you can encounter within your tiered matchmaking. And in our aim time, we've managed to bring down our rather weak aim time to 2.78 seconds, which means we still have to spend a good amount of time aiming in, although not as much as we used to, and this means that in combination with our accuracy, we can take some snapshots at closer ranges once we've spent a little bit of time, say half our aim time aiming in, and we should be able to hit our foe rather reliably in the weak spots we're aiming for. And our turret traverse is an average 25.26 degrees per second, again enough to bring the turret around, although this can lead to the risk of opponents being able to perform a circle of death around us, especially in vehicles such as an M41 or an XM800T if they are close enough and using their speed to their advantage as well as their overall manoeuvrability. So on the whole, we have a rather mixed set of statistics for our targeting, but hopefully we'll be able to get into those engagements where we can use our defence, our sustained damage and our alpha damage to our advantage and mitigate these weaknesses to an extent, as we always have our frontal armour pointing towards our opponents and they should struggle to get through us as we can gradually rack up the damage on them. But enough theory crafting, let us get into our gameplay for today. Today we are on the standard version of Ghostfield, and by looking at the team sheets we can see that we are in a tier 3 game where both teams have roughly the same number of tier 3s as they do tier 2s, and both teams have 3 tier 1s apiece. By looking at the compositions in a little bit more detail, we can see that either team has a clear advantage in terms of composition, whether it be significantly more MBTs at a given tier, light tanks, etc, etc. But we've already made our mind up as to where we're going to go. As we can see, we have spawned on the eastern side of the map and in the southernmost spawn for the eastern spawn point. Using the right hand side of the minimap in the bottom right hand corner of your screen to dictate east, the left hand side to dictate west, the top north and the south at the bottom. Whilst we are quite a mobile MBT, our mobility is average at best compared to everything else we can face, and this means that if we do decide to press north, it is going to take too long for us to get up to the northern side of the map, i.e. along the B line, in order to be able to make a significant contribution before our teammates already have. Instead, we are going to make our way south, along the southeastern approach from our own base, across the runway if possible, up into the southwestern approach towards the enemy spawn and the enemy's flag. And we can see here how the majority of our team have gone north, which means our contribution down in the south is going to be valued more, due to the lower number of numbers, with only another T-54, a Type 59 Legend and a Dragoon 90 alongside us. So as a 4 we're making our way along, and we also have a PT-76 making their way through the middle of the map. But focusing back here, we can see how our top speed of roughly 48.6 km an hour, although exceeding towards 49 km an hour as we go down the slope, is adequate and means that we can keep up with the pack and make our way across the battlefield at a reasonable rate, closing down the distance. And our teammates have already picked up on 3 enemy MBTs, 2 Pattern 48s and a T-54 along that southwestern approach. But wait for it, those numbers are going to multiply. Another Pattern 48, a Leopard 1, and very shortly an M113 as well. So the enemy team has split itself roughly 50-50, going north and south. Now we have the weaker numbers here, so we need to try and funnel the enemy effort. So we are going to go forward and use the large hill along that southwestern approach as cover. And we will fire on the move at this M113 using our improved accuracy on the move thanks to our crew skill, as discussed earlier, in order to make that shot count. And that M113 is now going to have to fall back, and we head up towards this significant boundary here, which acts as a funnel point for the enemy's MBTs to either come over the hill, as the Leopard 1 is going to, alternatively come down the rather narrow road. Now the Leopard 1 here is overextended to try and push us away and knock us out, whereby they ricocheted their first round off of our turret, and now they are starting to do a significant amount of damage to us, firing down into our upper frontal plate, where they'll cut through it instantly. And we are both exchanging high explosive anti-tank rounds here, but fortunately for us, we have caused their health to fall to a point whereby our allies, who have much cleaner line of sight on us than the Leopard 1's allies did, can knock the Leopard 1 out accordingly. And as this Pattern 48 overextends, we start to put armour piercing into them, putting 2 shells in, and as they get knocked out, we unfortunately take a very nasty shell from the T-54, which caused us to be down to less than 20% of our health, almost just down to 10%. And now we're going to have to implement our frontal armour a little bit more effectively, reversing away and putting ourselves at an angle whereby our lower frontal plate was extremely angled and our frontal plate in general was hard to penetrate. And we're doing the same again here as the T-54 is trying to shoot into a lower frontal plate which is angled down significantly as we're on a small incline, and this means that they ricocheted their last 2 rounds and we could knock them out accordingly, having tracked them in place, or our teammates having tracked them in place already. So we're now staying alive and using our armour a little bit more effectively. So we've had to use up our hit point port first, and now we're switching to our armour. The reverse of what we should really be doing, but we have made it work. And we've taken some ammo rack damage as well, although this is only damage to the ammo rack and does not have an effect, as far as I'm aware, on our reload rate. And if we do get hit again, we are a one-shot kill for our opponents, so this means we do not need to repair it. We are continuing to spot an enemy Dragoon 90 who we do not realise as we look in the third person view is hidden behind a small rock as well as the lay of the land, but it is always a good idea to use third person view to see what is blocking you from shooting at your opponents. And we have a pattern 48 trying to rush us down now, or at least rush down the road, and they have stopped after we have fired a shot. And our allies in the Type 59 at a longer range and the T-54 just behind us are providing a small buffer against that pattern 48. We are continuing to spot the other pattern on the other side of the hill, who is getting a little bit more aggressive and now takes a nasty hit from one of our allies as we try to pop a shot into them, but we aimed it a little bit low and hit the mound instead. And we're continuing to spot them, and the other 2 opponents, now a pattern 48 and that Dragoon 90, are being spotted by our allies a little bit further back. Although the spot is now for us on the Dragoon 90 and we knock them out accordingly, using our mobility in terms of short range acceleration to knock them out, and our accuracy on the move to our benefit. This is now just the 2 pattern 48s, although the M113 is also alive still. The pattern 48 at this point is shooting over a small ridgeline in the road, and we can unfortunately not put a round into the lower frontal plate, but instead have to aim towards the cupola of their turret to do a smaller amount of damage, although that shot didn't go in. As the pattern breaks forward again, this time they've overextended and we have a shot in their lower frontal plate, and already we are doing damage to our ammo rack because of our commander selection. As we reload, the pattern 48 is going to continue being aggressive in a short while, and we're going to see just how powerful our commander's skills are going to be. We pop round, aim towards the cupola of the pattern 48 and do a smaller amount of damage when we penetrate it, a standard game mechanic, but we're trying to put pressure on them and intimidate them to fall back or overextend. The other pattern 48 is also trying to lean round the corner here, and it is our allies who are spotting the 2 pattern 48s, not us at this point, even though we are proxy spotting technically. And we put another shot into the lower frontal plate of the pattern 48 from earlier, damaging their ammo rack once again. We put a third round in, kaboom! That's a detonation. And that just goes to show that the buff to the module damage we do of 20% thanks to Jonas's commander skills means that we can ammo rack our opponents a lot more easily. So 585 hit points of damage there in a single shot, very nice. And now we are waiting for our allies in the T-54 and the Type 59 to come up and support us against this pattern 48. And very shortly you're going to see me type in big capital letters into the chat, guys, help me please. Although I give them a bit of time because of the M113 trying to come around at this point and put some flanking shots into them. But unfortunately I do not want to go forward to contest this pattern 48 because they only need 1 decent round on my vehicle to knock it out. And I'm going to need at least 2, if not 3 shots to knock them out. So as you can see now, I'm starting to request for assistance, and my allies are now moving up, with the T-54 and the Type 59 having significantly more health than myself. So we're working together here once again. The T-54 is going head-to-head with the pattern 48, and we're going to make our way over the hill very gradually, albeit with a rather messy approach here as we come up at an angle and we need to realign our approach. We have a high explosive anti-tank round loaded. We now begin to align as the pattern 48 begins to fall back from our allies. We can get a shot into their side here, and we knock them out for kill number 4. We took our time to make sure the pattern 48 did not turn their turret at the last moment and shoot into our into our lower frontal plate at an upward angle, and we thank our T-54 and Type 59 allies for the assistance there. Much appreciated, gentlemen, and now we must make our way forward, or ladies in that regard as well. As we make our way forward here, we can see that there are 3 enemy vehicles left. We decide not to go directly for the enemy base, but instead cut back towards the airfield in case the 2 remaining opponents, now the Scorpion and the T-54, hyperextend towards our Dragoon 90 on the minimap, whereby we will have a shot across the open ground. But retrospectively, we remember that our view range is very weak with our setup, only 360 metres. They may have superior view ranges, so we decide instead to make our way towards the enemy cap circle now. as we believe our remnant teammates will be able to finish off the job against our foes, and if our opponents do come to try and stop us from capping, we will have minimised the potential distances at which they can spot us due to the lay of the land, which means we will spot them at the same time they spot us, and we will be able to react accordingly. If it is the Scorpion, they will fire high explosive at us and have a chance to knock us out in a single shot, if not two. And if it is the enemy T-54, we'll just have to use our armour effectively and try to reciprocate the favour with our 100mm main gun. We begin our capture, and as we do, we decide to reload a high explosive shell. The reason for this is that we believe the T-54 may be on low health, and as the Scorpion is a very lightly armoured vehicle, a high explosive round has a good chance of doing maximum damage against them. The Scorpion gets spotted over towards the northeastern side of the map and knocks out a Dragoon 90, but we are going to continue capping as our 3 remaining allies are holding down the northern section of the runway, and this means that all we have to do is look towards the northwestern corner, and they soon spot the T-54, and our high explosive round may have knocked them out in a single shot if they had come towards us, going by their health pool, so it was a good call. And we reload an armour piercing round here because we expect the T-54 to get knocked out by our allied T-54, and we're just waiting on the Scorpion. As 373 health, there would be a 2-shot kill regardless what round we use, and at the distances we would be firing at, we would get a potential overmatch 50% of the time, but even that would be a 200 HP damage shot, so we're just going to sit here and wait. We continue to cap, and our allies are now cornering the Scorpion gradually. It's just nice to pick up some cap points and have a relax after a rather hard working day. And with that, the game is won. And it is time for us to take a look at the post-game stats. Well, that was a rather hectic game, and with it we managed to pick up 5,698 reputation points, with that number being so large due to a ×3 for the first victory of the day, and 78,986 credits. Our 3 major contributions were 3,792 HP in damage, 766 spotting damage, and 7 enemy vehicles spotted. We also managed to pick up the award of Gold Medal for coming first on our team for reputation earned, and Master Gunner for being able to achieve a hit rate of 80%, having fired at least 10 shots and doing a potential damage of at least 1000 HP. Coming on to our performance versus the enemy team, we can see that in general we did a large amount of damage across a number of enemy vehicles, but where we had the opportunity to focus our fire down on a specific enemy vehicle to knock it out of the game completely, we did so. In particular, looking at the 1,187 damage done to the Pattern 48, whereby we knocked out the entirety of their health, with the final shot being that ammo rack explosion, and the same for the Leopard 1, where we knocked out 840 of their hit points, roughly 2/3 of their health, and 673 hit points on the T-54 that almost knocked us out, again being roughly 2/3 of their hit points. We also managed to pick up a small amount of spotting damage, but this was evenly distributed amongst our work and that of our 2 supporting MBTs, as we kept spotting enemy vehicles, with our vehicle proxy spotting the enemy vehicles around the other side of the hill, and as we leaned out to take some shots, and our allies spotting enemy vehicles at a longer distance, being from a more drawn back position, looking along the southwestern approach that we tried to contest throughout the match. Looking at our performance compared to the rest of our team then, we can see that we topped the charts in terms of reputation points earned, although not by too significant a margin, earning approximately 300 more compared to the second place player on our team. But in damage dealt, we exceeded the charts, whereby we doubled the damage dealt compared to the second place player on our team. But to contextualise this, we should note that the T-54 player Hammerman, and a shout out to you, was the individual who supported us down in that southwestern corner, whereby it is very likely that they were spotting the enemy MBTs as they were coming down that approach road, and we were putting the shots into them as they make their way down. Thereby Hammerman was picking up the spotting damage that we were picking up in terms of base damage dealt. And we worked well together, as it is demonstrated here, in being able to clean out that southwestern corner with the support of our Dragoon 90, who seemed to fall away quite early on, and our Type 59 Legend, who was shooting from the distance, whereby they were able to pick up some sniping shots, but Hammerman and I seemed to be the main components of the push through that southwestern corner, and in the battle of attrition we gradually won through. Looking at our individual performance details, we can see that we're able to pick up the Master Gunner award because we fired 18 shots with 16 landed on target. In terms of the 2 misses, these were rushed shots, not from our vehicle's perspective but from us, and really we should have calmed down a little bit when we tried to fire these shots in order to make them count, alternatively not fire at all, as it is very difficult in general to miss a target at point blank range, but we managed to achieve it nonetheless. Furthermore, we can see in terms of our overall damage output that in the 4 enemies we killed, and the total damage caused being 3,792, the vast amount of damage that we caused, i.e. 3,457 of it, was caused at distances closer than 150 metres, demonstrating the brawler playstyle straight away. And on top of this, we have to consider that 15 of the 16 rounds that hit their mark penetrated the target, showing the penetration power of our armour piercing rounds and high explosive anti-tank rounds on the T-54's 100mm main gun. Our final point of interest is in terms of our protection, whereby we managed to mitigate 649 potential damage in all, 348 coming from non-penetrating hits and 301 from ricochets. If we had not been able to mitigate this damage, with the 2 ricochets, or at least one of them come from the T-54 that we eventually tracked in place to finish them off rather than let them finish us off, we would have definitely died, as by the end of the game we were down to just over 10% of our hit point pool and would not have survived another hit from our opponents if it had penetrated. To conclude then, hopefully today's gameplay has been a valid demonstration of how the T-54 may be employed in a close range brawler playstyle in order to beat its foes via a war of attrition, whereby we were able to absorb a good amount of attention from the enemy team arrayed against us, whereby they had the superior numbers compared to our own MBT tank destroyer layout. The 4 of us versus approximately 6 to 7 enemy vehicles were able to defeat the superior foe as we and our T-54 took the frontline point and held down the corner of that southwestern approach. We lured a good amount of attention from the enemy team and used our armour to ricochet a number of rounds from our opponents and our health point pool, albeit limited, to soak up a good amount of damage, at which point we were able to distribute the damage back towards our foes via our own 100mm cannon armament and that of our allies who were sitting a little bit further back. And this tactic can be employed at higher tiers as well, but we must remember one thing in all of this. We were not operating alone, and that whilst we were in the face of our opponents, we did have a number of friendlies supporting us and providing that substantial fire support. As if we were operating alone, it is very likely that once our opponents realised that we were by ourselves, they would have rushed us and cut us apart as part of a wolf pack, meaning there is a limitation in the brawler playstyle if you do act as an independent vehicle rather than as part of a little unit. And so I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future Armoured Warfare gameplays on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck on the battlefield.